In June 2020, a global payments company announced that $1.9 billion in cash, money that was supposed to be sitting in bank accounts in the Philippines, probably didn't exist. Not that the money had been stolen, not that it had been lost, that it had never been there in the first place. The accounts were supposed to hold funds on behalf of Wirecard's business partners. Auditors had been told the accounts existed. Documents had been produced to prove it. The documents were fake. Wirecard was a German financial technology company. It processed digital payments, online purchases, card transactions, payments across borders. Think of it as the invisible infrastructure behind online shopping. Founded in 1999, the company grew steadily through the 2000s and then rapidly through the 2010s. By 2018, it had joined the DAX, Germany's blue-chip stock index, home to companies like BMW, Siemens, and Volkswagen. Being added to the DAX was a stamp of legitimacy. It meant institutional investors were required to hold the stock. It meant the company was considered among Germany's most important businesses. At its peak in 2018, Wirecard had a market capitalization of around $24 billion, making it more valuable than Deutsche Bank. Its CEO was Markus Braun, an Austrian computer scientist who had built his reputation on Wirecard's rapid expansion into new markets. Its COO was Jan Marsalek, a charismatic Austrian who managed relationships with business partners across Asia, the Middle East, and Russia. And for years, the numbers looked impressive. Strong revenue growth, rising profits, expansion into new markets across Asia and the Middle East. The problem was that much of it was fiction. The first serious public challenge to Wirecard came not from regulators, not from auditors, but from a financial journalist named Dan McCrum at the Financial Times. In 2015, McCrum began raising questions about Wirecard's accounting. Over the following years, the FT published a series of investigations examining specific transactions, suspicious patterns in the accounts, and concerns from sources inside the company. Wirecard's response was aggressive. The company denied everything. It accused the FT of being part of a coordinated effort by short sellers, investors who bet against a company's stock, to manipulate the market. Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, appeared to accept this narrative. Instead of investigating Wirecard, BaFin opened an investigation into the journalists and short sellers for potential market manipulation. The German government expressed public support for Wirecard. German politicians treated it as a national champion under attack from foreign financial interests. Meanwhile, Wirecard hired private intelligence operatives to investigate FT journalists. Their activities were monitored. Their sources were sought. Dan McCrum kept publishing. By 2019, questions about Wirecard's accounts had become impossible to ignore, even for its auditor. Ernst & Young, EY, had been Wirecard's auditor for a decade. It had signed off on accounts that included billions of euros supposedly held in escrow accounts in Asia, managed by third-party partners. In 2019, concerns about these accounts reached a critical point. EY began requesting direct confirmation from the banks where the money was supposedly held, something that should have been standard practice from the beginning. In 2020, EY was told by the banks involved that they had no record of the accounts. The trustee companies that were supposed to be managing the funds couldn't verify their existence. In June 2020, EY refused to sign off on Wirecard's 2019 accounts. It was the first time in the company's history that its auditor had declined to certify the results. Wirecard announced that $1.9 billion in cash, around a quarter of its total reported assets, could not be confirmed and probably does not exist. The stock collapsed. In 2 days, Wirecard lost more than 3/4 of its market value. On June 22, 2020, CEO Markus Braun resigned and was arrested. Days later, Wirecard filed for insolvency. COO John Marsalek was suspended on June 18, 2020. 3 days later, he boarded a private plane in Austria. He has not been seen publicly since. Subsequent investigations by journalists and intelligence services revealed that Marsalek had extensive connections to Russian intelligence. He had claimed to Russian contacts to have access to classified information from Western governments. He had met with officials linked to Russian military intelligence. The German government, European prosecutors, and Interpol issued warrants for his arrest. He is believed to be in Russia, protected from extradition. Marsalek became one of the most wanted fugitives in European financial history. Perhaps the most studied aspect of the Wirecard scandal is the failure of Ernst & Young. EY had audited Wirecard for 10 years. For most of that decade, the company reported substantial cash balances sitting in third-party trustee accounts in Asia. The standard procedure for verifying that cash exists is to contact the bank directly and obtain a confirmation. This is a basic audit procedure. It is taught in first-year accounting courses. EY did not consistently obtain independent bank confirmations for these accounts. For years, it accepted documents and confirmations provided by Wirecard's own management and its selected partners. When EY did finally request independent confirmation in 2020, the accounts could not be verified. The question that remains unanswered, and is central to ongoing legal proceedings, is whether EY was deceived by sophisticated fraud, or whether it failed to perform basic procedures it was required to perform. EY has maintained that it was the victim of an elaborate and deliberate fraud. Critics and regulators have questioned whether sufficient skepticism and due diligence were applied over many years. Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, was widely criticized for its response to the Wirecard scandal. Rather than investigate the company when concerns were raised, BaFin investigated the journalists raising those concerns. Germany did not, at the time, give BaFin direct supervisory authority over Wirecard, because Wirecard was classified as a technology company, not a bank. Its banking subsidiary had a separate regulator. This regulatory gap, a €24 billion financial services company sitting outside the direct supervision of the main financial regulator, was identified as a systemic failure. The president of BaFin resigned in the aftermath. Germany subsequently reformed its regulatory structure to ensure companies like Wirecard would fall under direct financial oversight. Marcus Braun is on trial in Munich. The proceedings began in 2023 and are expected to last years. Jan Marsalek remains at large. Thousands of investors lost money. Employees lost jobs. German financial regulation was exposed as inadequate for the companies it was supposed to oversee. And EY, one of the world's most prestigious audit firms, faces ongoing civil and regulatory scrutiny over its role in signing off on Wirecard's accounts year after year. The Wirecard scandal raised a question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. If a company can fabricate $1.9 billion in cash, produce supporting documents, and pass an annual audit for a decade, what exactly is the audit for? This channel covers corporate fraud, regulatory failures, and the compliance breakdowns behind them, clearly explained every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story.